Welcome. If you're a woman who has a sense that there's more out there for you, you're in the right place. I'm Whitney Baker, host of the Electric Ideas podcast. Somewhere along the line of work and kids, life carried on, but I lost track of my truth. I'm on a reflective journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I interview a woman who is lighting her own path and offering others hope. Before our conversation ends, we'll share a reflective question for you to explore. Sometimes all we need is a jolt, a fresh idea, an aha moment that connects us to a sense of possibility. This, my friends, is what I call an electric idea. Welcome back to Electric Ideas. Today's guest is Jennifer Pansa Rohr. Jennifer has been an industry leader in the health and wellness space for more than a decade. She's passionate about what she calls empowering a healer in every home through yoga, mindfulness, and natural remedies. As you'll learn in this conversation, Jennifer's path into this wellness space was through yoga. You might recognize her from her online yoga classes that are available on You Aligned, or from the cover of Yoga Journal, or even from her last Hawaii retreat, which was featured in Forbes magazine. And fun fact, she even taught yoga on Richard Branson's private island. So while yoga was her entry point, Jennifer has really evolved her expertise, including her focus on less toxic living. So today we are going to talk a lot about yoga, but also learn about essential oils because that's one of her favorite topics. And while yoga and essential oils might seem like two totally different topics to you, Jennifer is going to share her perspective on why they go hand in hand. This is a fun, feel-good episode. I know you're going to have a lot of takeaways, so let's get into it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Whitney. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are a longtime yoga teacher as well as an essential oils enthusiast. Let's start with yoga. What is something you wish that more women understood or appreciated when it comes to the physical practice aspect of yoga and wellness?
That's a great question, Whitney. And I'm so glad that you're asking it because I feel like yoga is like an iceberg where on the surface level, people are so attracted to, oh, I just want to be more flexible, or maybe I can lose some weight, or, I want to have less stress, right? And they're drawn to yoga for some of these surface level concepts. And yet there's this whole iceberg underneath the water that is so much more of what yoga really is. And so I want to say my first answer to that question is that spirituality, the aspect of being able to connect more deeply to yourself and know yourself more intimately, is the biggest thing that yoga can provide that I feel like is a missed opportunity sometimes for people, especially if they are going to practice without that being part of their mindset. So I would say that's the first thing. And that is like a whole wormhole, of course, we could get into. And then the other thing, just on a more practical note of the physical practice, I feel like if more women understood how to properly breathe using their exhale and lifting in their pelvic floor and drawing the navel in, which in yoga we call that the bandhas, the Uddiyana Bandha and Mula Bandha, that act of properly breathing and drawing the core and lifting in the pelvic floor would take people's physical goals from a place of stagnancy to this incredible energy surge, empowerment, more dialed in core, weight loss, all of the things that I think people are drawn to yoga for on the surface, and what keeps people going back because it is a great physical exercise, that they would get 80% more bang for their buck in their yoga class if they were just breathing properly and engaging through those muscles. And I feel like they don't really talk about that so much in yoga, especially if you're going to a class where you're just doing a flow class or power yoga, you're not getting cued on that throughout the class. And I feel like that can be the huge difference in a physical practice from you're just getting a little benefits to really feeling and knowing that your body is changing from that deep core engagement. And not to mention, everybody wants a tight pelvic floor,
Right?
Especially, after kids or as we get older, it's really important, especially for women, for us to have everything dialed in. Just breathing and doing your bandha work in practice can be essentials.
I want to circle back to a few points that you made because, first of all, I think it's a slippery slope because I totally agree with what you said. I feel like some people, it's like we want everyone to feel welcome in a yoga class. And I've been to yoga classes that are like at a gym on vacation and it's people just kind of flailing around and there's no cues. And I'm for any movement that feels good in your body. And it's not like either of us is saying someone is doing something wrong, but I
Mhm.
feel more my lens has shifted as I think that yoga is such a rich practice in so many ways that are on and off the mat. And a lot of people end up going to a class and being like, oh, that was awkward. That's not for me. And it's just, there's so many variables. And I feel like they're maybe selling the practice short. What advice do you have for women in terms of giving themselves time or space to find a yoga practice that might be a fit with their interests and lifestyle?
I would say the type of exercise or practice that you're naturally drawn to is going to be a fit in yoga. So, like a lot of people that I typically teach a more vinyasa based or a power yoga class. So, this is for people who are fast paced, who have a fast paced life, who want to, you feel better when you're moving all the parts of your body and you want that like sweat to just purge whatever's in your body and you want to feel that exhaustion at the end of class and that will help you to find stillness. If you are a person that is you finding yourself unmotivated to go to a workout, you're so stressed from your normal life that you're revving really high all throughout the day that the thought of going to exercise, the thought of doing yoga class is so exhausting that you can't even fathom like doing push-ups or jumping around. That's not going to give you energy. Then going to a more restorative practice like yin or a restorative class is going to give you a lot more benefits because you can get some of that passive stretching and reset the nervous system. And that is going to give you more benefits than jumping up and down like a crazy person. It depends on each person what you're drawn to, but I work a lot with athletes and if someone's used to doing fast paced cardio, if you go to a restorative class, it's going to be like torture because if you really used to a fast pace and it's hard, it's more difficult to sit still. Going to a slower pace class where it's mostly stretching, mostly breathing and laying on the floor, it can be very challenging. And so finding a faster pace class is going to give you the opportunity to explore yoga, but in a way that is more in alignment with where your mind, where your pacing, where your body wants to go. And the cool thing about yoga is there's so many different types of classes and every instructor is totally different. So I would just say be adventurous just because if you go to one yoga class and you don't like it or you don't like the teacher, even within the same studio, you might find a different teacher or a different class that is more in line with what would feel good for your body and that you enjoy it. So I would just say if you're brand new to yoga, just to keep trying it because you'll find your flow.
Well, I think as with most things, wellness, everybody is different and every body is different. And sometimes for women who are more on the go or more I will say high achieving in their workouts. I don't know if that's a fair term. Sometimes maybe what their bodies need is more of a restorative. So I think it just depends on the season too. But can you tell us a little bit more about that breath? Because I bet a lot of people listening have tried yoga or in some capacity or have their practice. And it's talked about so much, but I feel like a lot of women probably don't feel confident that they're anchoring the breath properly with movement or kind of what you were saying before about into our pelvic floor.
Yes. So the breathing, most of the time that you're doing movement with yoga, it is the Ujjayi style breath, which is an inhale through the nose and an exhale out of the nose with a gentle constriction in the back of your throat. So it slows down the exhale. And when we slow down the exhale, we are telling our nervous system to chill out so that you're not getting that cardio, you're not creating that stressful environment for your body, even though you're moving. This is the hardest part about yoga. For me, at least, the breath. If you're in class and you're breathing different than the teacher, or you're not breathing, you forget to breathe, you're a normal human. I always tell my students, us humans are the only animals that have to remind each other to breathe as we're doing exercise. It's like the cheetah is running to catch the gazelle, and it's not like, remember to breathe, inhale, exhale, right? But for some reason, us humans, we start moving and we stop breathing. And so I think that it's important for people to know that it's okay to not breathe in yoga, and that this is actually the most difficult part of the practice, is really being able to find your breath and link your breath to movement and remember to do this deep therapeutic breath throughout the class. And that's a practice that you can work on for your whole life. So there's not like a right or wrong way with breathing, but the general idea with the breath is that exhale. And as you exhale, when you're fully exhaling, if you're drawing the air out and pulling your belly button in towards your spine, that is going to, number one, complete the exhale. And number two, you're going to engage more than just your surface level abs, but you're actually going to be working the transverse abdominis, and your whole diaphragm, your whole core is being used when you do that. And then, so Uddiyana Bandha is that drawing, we call it, bandha means a lock, or it's a holding of the energetics, but also on a physical sense, you're engaging the muscles. So drawing the navel in towards the spine and then lifting the pelvic floor, almost like a Kegel, feeling that upward draw is going to contain the energy within your body, which is what we're doing, the prana, the energy, the life force, as we're breathing it in. We want to hold that container, and you want to hold it within so that it's not leaking out. So as you exhale, when you're squeezing everything out, you're engaging that pelvic floor, you're lifting up through the drawing the navel to the spine, you're basically creating this empty vessel. And so that you can properly fill up again. So it's an emptying and it's an expanding. And by doing that, it's like somebody playing the accordion. When you're doing that fully and completely, your body, your muscles, your fascia, everything is going to get more. Well, you're really working hard. Like, you could just sit and do this Ujjayi breath as we're talking and just sit there, and you will break out in a sweat if you're doing it properly, because it really does require a lot of engagement. But most of the time in class, people are doing maybe 10% of that with the breath. And so the effectiveness of the workout could be much more if the focus were more on the breath and on activating the bandhas throughout the practice.
I think that's super helpful, because whether you're newer to yoga or you're an old pro, it's at least good to be aware that is a big piece of it that you can continue to master. Not that anyone expects you to do it overnight, but it's a big piece. And I think it's missed a lot. And I don't hear too much instruction around that when I go to classes, minus just to remember to keep breathing.
Well, the thing is weird. I mean, it's not a normal thing to talk about people's pelvic floor. I mean, I guess if you're in a specific class for that. So I think as yoga teachers, we, especially if you're trauma informed, or you don't really, it's awkward when you're in a public setting in your class for people to talk about the pelvic floor. You don't really have time to explain it like the way that I'm doing now. You don't have 5 or 10 minutes to explain what is your pelvic floor and how do you engage it and how do you lift up and what does that feel like and which muscles. It can be awkward. So I think a lot of teachers don't talk about that. And it's really important though. It's like, that's the root chakra. That is the sacral chakra. This is the foundation of our bodies and our energetic blueprint. And I think it's important, especially honoring the true yogic traditions, to talk about it more in classes and utilize it, because there's so many more benefits when you're practicing in alignment with the breath and with the bandhas. And we didn't even talk about Jalandhara Bandha. That's the throat lock. And when you do all three together, that's the perfect trio of energy, emptiness, and expansion that you're doing throughout your practice, that I find to be, that's like advanced yoga. If you can breathe and remember the bandhas and do the pose, it's like, whoa, that's next level. I'm still working to get there myself in all of the poses, but it's definitely a good thing to be aware of, especially if you have been practicing a while, to add that in. And as you do, that's really going to energetically create a big difference at the end of class.
Well, lots to think about and learn about from the physical practice. I want to circle back a little bit too, though, because you talk a lot about the yoga lifestyle, and we alluded a little bit to yoga being more than just the asanas or the physical poses that a lot of people, especially in the United States, I feel like just kind of assume that's what yoga is all about. I know it's an entire lifestyle and we don't have time on in a single conversation to unpack everything. But I'm curious just because you are someone I've met in person. I feel like you do embody what you teach. You have a very energetic glow about you. Can you just share a few examples of how you personally practice a yoga lifestyle outside of the studio or off the mat?
Yeah, of course. I think that when people start yoga, it is for the physical or for stretching or stress relief or whatever. But after doing it more and learning more about yoga, you feel different in your body. Like, for example, if you are eating things that do not feel good for you, your body is going to tell you in a yoga practice. This is what our bodies are so great at communicating to us when we listen and we put our bodies in a place and experiences where we can talk to it better, which I feel like yoga is, that you'll get some of these lifestyle cues, like if you're super sweaty and stinky in your yoga practice, right? Like if you're experiencing your own body odor and you're like, oh, wow, like I'm disgusting, or you have some particular smell, that's a sign that there's something going on in your body, maybe a bacterial growth, overgrowth, or maybe a cleanse you might need. And so it's another cue that your body is giving you that you can get from practice. And if you're experiencing sensations in poses, right? We hold our emotions in our bodies. It's just part of being human and the energetic alignment that we have. And so as you're experiencing, you'll have little epiphanies throughout the class or little emotional breakthroughs that, if you're stretching your hips, and sometimes I'll start crying, right? And it's like those moments where you're in a pigeon pose. And I remember one time, and when before I became a yoga teacher, but I was attending class a lot, which is where I really fell in love with yoga. I was in college in Colorado up in the mountains in Vail, and I would go to yoga all the time. And I remember one time being in pigeon pose, and it was just this flood of emotions came over me. And I just was crying, and I just had this feeling, this download, whatever you want to call it, that I had to quit my job and I had to make a big change in my life. I had to move. And it was because of yoga. It was the physical practice that brought that awareness up, because it was almost like as if it was leaving my body from that pose. And I hear stories like this all the time from my students, that they'll come up to me after class and share something that came up for them. And I think it's in these moments that it's easy to just pretend everything's okay, or put a smile on our face and walk around. And that in our mats is one of the few places that you can really be honest and vulnerable with yourself and hold that space. And to me, living yoga is feeling those things, is having awareness of those little pings, and then being able to act on them in real life. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like the more of the take. And for me, one of those things that has really guided me into a different way of living yoga off the mat is the non-toxic lifestyle component of it, which is, I just had no idea how many, living in harmony, what that means, right? Cleanliness, asatya, is one of the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga. It's how do I create cleanliness and purity in my life and my home? And yoga is all about union. It's finding connection with ourselves. And I believe that connection with ourselves is also connection with earth and with Mother Earth. And that union is one and the same. And so as I've found to become more, as I go more inward within my own practice, it causes me to have more reflection about what I'm putting on me and how I'm taking care of my home, my environment, and ultimately the planet too.
Yeah, I love all that. What's kind of resonating for me is just to kind of echo that back for our listeners is that through your practice, number one, you've deepened your awareness of your own body's needs physically because you're just more attuned. Two, you've experienced emotional releases and kind of maybe uncovered places within your body where you didn't even know you were storing stress, which has also led to clarity across the board. I think sometimes when we are a little bit more cleared, and this can come through yoga, I teach meditation. I think sometimes we get, like you said, the download, the hit. It's like once you're feeling more aware and attuned to yourself and you know a truth, you just know the truth. You have to experience that. But I completely get what you're saying. And then lastly, it seems like you've just been inclined to take the non toxic lifestyle seriously, not only for yourself, but for the world, for other people, for Mother Earth. And that actually leads perfectly into essential oils, because I know that essential oils are your other love in life. And that's how I originally met you, was because I heard you give a very compelling talk. And I was ignorant of how much we can use essential oils for. So, just to make sure we have time to learn a little bit about that, do you want to start by just defining what an essential oil is and give us a quick overview of why you love them?
Of course. Yeah. Essential oils for me, especially with yoga, it's like peanut butter and jelly. You just can't go wrong. They're just so perfect for each other, especially for anyone who is interested in living the yogic lifestyle off of the mat. And essential oils, you might think of them just as the little brown bottles. I've got some here on my desk. You might see these little things in the store or around. And it's funny because we see them, but we don't really think about the plant behind the bottle. So basically, an essential oil is the essence of a plant that's either steam distilled or cold press extracted that is bottled up into these little bottles for our health benefits. But the way that I like to think about them is like Marvel superhero characters, where, out in nature, each individual plant has its own defense mechanisms against invaders like funguses and parasites and insects, right? And it has this amazing essence which attracts the right pollinators, the right animals that are going to eat it and then distribute the seeds. And so what I like to think about each plant is like one of these little Marvel superheroes. Each plant has its own superpower. And that when we bottle that essence, we take that prana, that jing, whatever word you want to use, we take that and we put it into these little bottles, then we have that superpower that the plant has at our own fingertips, and that we can employ that little superhero to do whatever we want it to do in our lives. So, for example, an essential oil like clove is really good at repelling insects and germs, bugs, bacteria. It has a lot of antiseptic properties. And so when we use that little superpower guy for ourselves, it's going to help repel bacteria, fungus. It's going to help our bodies in that same way, physically and energetically. So we can use them like little helpers. It's like I like to think of essential oils as having grandma's garden in your purse, because we don't have gardens anymore, really, unless you're a homesteader, which I love that too. And we don't have access to a lot of the plants in the way that we would have maybe in our grandparents' or great grandparents' generation, that were more in touch with the land, that were more utilizing their herbal remedies and different things because it was part of, they had to, right? Now we can just run to the doctor and get antibiotics for everything, but that may not necessarily be the best thing for us. And so we can put these little plant helpers to work a lot of times in prevention and in our daily lifestyle to be able to support ourselves so that we can be empowered and stay out of the doctor's offices or hospitals more often and be able to self-regulate without needing to just constantly rely on something outside of ourselves, outside of nature, to truly be in balance and in harmony.
I recognize that there is a litany of ways that essential oils can be used, and there are so many different ones. When we spoke, I shared kind of a common practice for me, which is just using a little bit as kind of part of my morning intention setting and putting a little bit on my wrist. And then anytime I kind of feel like I can feel my heartbeat going up or I need to take a few breaths, I can take a sniff of that and remember my intention. And I don't do that every day, but that's just a simple example of how I was using essential oils. I know a lot of women in my community are managing households and work and everything. So obviously, stress comes into play. And also the desire for just more energy depending on the age. Could you give us one or two simple ways that women can incorporate high quality essential oils into their lives in a way that's just kind of simple?
Yeah. So the most important thing is establishing a routine that works for you and fits your needs. Every person has a unique set of challenges and goals and everything. So that's what I love to do. I do personalized consultations, which you've received one yourself, is to help people understand what are the oils that they should use for them. What is that routine and what does that look like? So for me, like right now on my desk, I have a grapefruit and I have my big bottle of my jug of water here, just in a mason jar. And I like to put a couple drops in. And this is good for supporting detox. This is good for supporting my liver. This is going to boost my metabolism. And it smells amazing. It smells like grapefruits. So as I'm smelling it, it's giving me a mood boost. And because it tastes delicious, I'm going to stay hydrated and I'm going to drink this whole thing of water. So for me, it's having a routine of putting oils in places where you're actually going to use them. So if we, for example, if you're a lot of their moms are out there, right? If you're trying to teach your kid to brush their teeth every night, but the toothbrush is in the kitchen, in the bed, in the drawer in the kitchen, and you're not the one that's reminding your kid, like, hey, you got to go brush your teeth. Wouldn't it be easier if the toothbrush was just out on the counter right there, ready to teach the child every day, like, hey, we're going to brush our teeth. We do this together. This is what we do for our routine. It's teaching ourselves, right? It's parenting ourselves to create that routine, but putting the oils, I find, in places where they're going to be most strategic for that person. So say, for example, you want to have that positive energy. If you're busy, you're a high achiever, you're at work all day, I recommend keeping oils on your desk where you're in your workplace and keeping them out so that you see them. Like for me, I wouldn't remember, I love oils and I do them all the time, but if they're not out, if I didn't have them right here on my desk, then I wouldn't remember to use them. And so, just before I got on this call with you, I was like, oh, there's my mint. This is my favorite one for energy and focus. Let me just grab it real quick and put a couple drops in my hand and smell it, breathe it in, and have that little energy boost, that clarity right there, just because it's in front of me. And so I'll put my favorite oils places that I use them. But important fact, which I forgot to mention about taking oils internally, please do not leave this podcast and go over to Whole Foods or CVS and purchase just whatever grapefruit or lemon to put in your water because you heard me say it, because not all essential oils are created equal. And so that is one thing that I didn't know before getting more into this industry and really understanding is that most essential oils on the market, over 80 something percent, are adulterated, which means that they are not safe to use really anyway, but they aren't pure. So you have to be really careful when it comes to oils of knowing what you're purchasing, because you don't want to end up with a skin irritation or drink something that on the back of the bottle said flammable or, call poison control if you ingest. And not all oils are created equal. So just because it says on the front 100% pure, whatever, lemon, peppermint, tea tree, which most of them do say that, it's not a regulated industry. So unless the oil is tested through GCMS testing for, I think 70 minutes is the company that I work with, then you won't know what's actually inside of it as a consumer, which is really frustrating, but that could be a concern. So just public service announcement to anyone listening
Yes.
or watching this, to just make sure that you're choosing a high quality essential oil that has gone through testing, that is safe, so that you're actually going to get those benefits.
Yes. The bottom line, not all essential oils are created equally. So do a little research. I know that you could talk about essential oils forever, but this is such a simple question. And I feel like it ties together your worlds. How do you clean your yoga mat?
Ooh, that's a great question. So for my yoga mat, I clean it with many different things, but I would say my favorite blend is you can just get a spray bottle, an empty spray bottle, and mix tea tree, which is really good for cleaning all things. I actually clean a lot of stuff in my house. It's a really good antimicrobial and it just smells so good. It's really fresh and uplifting. I like to combine that with eucalyptus and peppermint. And I mix that maybe like 5 to 10 drops of each in a 16-ounce glass spray bottle, which you can just get on Amazon, with some water and a little bit of witch hazel or alcohol, and then just spray your mat. I also sometimes do it without witch hazel and alcohol, and it works just as great. The spray won't last as long.
And if you are someone that isn't trying to ingest or clean with essential oils right now, but you're like the mindfulness aspect, I'm just going to get a few that I love the scent of and put them on my body. What do you recommend mixing them with? Or what's the best practice there?
That's a good question. So again, this comes to, you still have to be careful with quality and purity, because fragrance, most people don't know this, but once I started diving into non-toxic living, the ingredient fragrance or perfume on any label, if you read on the back of it, that means that there are synthetic fragrances in there, which are actually listed as the number one endocrine disruptor, which means that your hormones are being disrupted. So if you have thyroid issues, if you're having issues with your cycle, if you're breaking out, if you're having fertility troubles, like so many things that I see women dealing with all the time can be directly linked back to this one ingredient, perfume, fragrance, whatever, because it can be thousands of chemicals that make up that one word that are out there. Then when you're using a pure essential oil, it's a totally different experience for your body than when you're using a synthetic. We need it to be pure for it to interact with our own organic chemistry. So it's really a chemistry thing. You're made up of atoms and protons and neutrons, and it's not going to interact with this synthetic fragrance the way that it would a pure oil. To answer your question in a very long roundabout way is that, my favorite oils for mood, it really depends on the person, but I personally really love citrus oils for boosting mood as a fragrance. Lemon, orange, grapefruit. There's so many great citruses. Lime, bergamot are fantastic for mood, stress relief. They are great to put in a diffuser, to dab on your wrist, to put in your water, to just help brighten the mood. Also florals. So florals are lavender, rose, geranium. These are oils that are really uplifting and they smell really good. They're very light. Jasmine, neroli. These are really nice, light essences that I love, especially to apply. And also I know that it's going to help my body, help support my immune system, help my hormones to be produced the correct way instead of harming them, which I think is great.
All right. Well, that gives us a lot to think on when it comes to essential oils. I always end my episodes with an opportunity for reflection. And so across all these topics we've discussed, for women who are looking just to step into the next best version of themselves, what's one question women could be asking themselves more?
That's a beautiful question. I love that you end your podcasts like this. One question that I would encourage women to ask themselves is, how can I be more supportive to myself right now? Or what can I do to support myself more? Because I find that as women, we tend to care for things and people around us. We're the last ones on the list a lot of times. And turning that love and support instead of criticism to ourselves is really important. And I don't feel like we ask ourselves that question enough.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I know that my community will be excited to follow you and learn more from you. So where can we find you?
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you. So you can find me on Instagram. It's probably the easiest way to connect with me. My handle is at Jennifer Pansa Rohr, PANSAROHR. And if you're interested in learning more about oils, getting one of those customized routines, I'm your girl. I can help you out and make sure that you can get the best oils at a discounted price.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're looking for more, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman. And if you enjoyed the show, I invite you to support me by leaving a review or sharing it with a friend. Hope you have an inspired day.